So this is part one of a four-part series that we're going through, talking about the four distinctives for our community groups. What do we consider healthy according to biblical standards for life together in Christian community? And really all of this vision, these distinctives come out of Acts chapter 2, verses 41 through 47. So what's happening in this text is Peter has just preached the gospel. He's just told everybody who was willing to listen about the good news of Jesus Christ. And at the hearing of those words, this is what happens. In verse 41, those who received his word were baptized, and there were added to that day about 3,000 souls. Now, what happens after that is what's going to set up the ideal picture of what our groups are all about and what Christian community really is all about. In verse 42 it says, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul. And many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles, and all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who are being saved." So from this text comes our vision, our preferred future for our groups, what we're after, what our ideal pursuit is. And what we'll see here at the beginning is as Peter preaches the gospel, it forms a community. There are people who receive that word, believe in Jesus, and they're formed around the gospel. And then we'll see what's the first thing they do. They devote themselves to the apostles' teaching. What is the apostles' teaching if not everything that Peter just preached to them? So the gospel both forms and informs Christian community. So our first distinctive, as we describe it, is gospel-centeredness. The first distinctive of healthy community is that we are first gospel-centered. Why is that? Why does that matter? What is the gospel? The gospel, in short and narrowly, is the finished work of Jesus Christ on our behalf. His person and his work, what he did, who he is, that specifically is the gospel. In a broader sense, it's the whole story of the Bible. It's really the whole story of history as a whole. And so this story of God is broken down into four movements: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And in those four movements, we see the glory of God, the brokenness that's caused by sin, and the beautiful, gracious redemption of Jesus Christ and through his death on the cross in our place. That's the gospel. So what this means is when Paul says in Romans 1:16, he says, "I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power." Therein lies the power of God. Not do better, try harder. So often in a walk with Jesus, in any kind of religious context at all, whether it's Christianity or any other major world religion, it's all about do better, try harder. What I do is what puts me into God's good graces. The good news of the gospel says it's not what you do, it's what Christ has done. That's what defines you. That's what defines our relationship with God. So now the hardest work has been done and accomplished by Jesus. So our job now is to work from that finished work, not for God's approval. So these other distinctives that we're going to talk about of healthy community, of godly Christian community, are downstream symptoms, growth in understanding of the scriptures, a love for our neighbors. All of these things are downstream symptoms of a heart that's been gripped by the gospel. So let me ask you this question: are you gospel fluent? Can you articulate that central piece, the good news, the sweet spot of the gospel to yourself, to your friends, and your community? And is your community, is your time together formed by the gospel? And is it informed by the gospel? Because the reality is, as God in Christ has been to us, so we are to each other. As God in Christ has been to us, gospel, so we are to one another, community. So when God says forgive one another, he says do so like I did to you through Christ. Forgive one another as God in Christ has forgiven you, and so on. So everything that's going to be healthy about our groups is going to flow from this gospel centrality. We're going to keep coming back to that over and over and over again.